So let's see what's new today when it comes to automotive design. We do have a new Mercedes concept, and that is the Vision One-Eleven with up to close to 2,000 horsepower and gull-wing doors. So what we're gonna do in this video, since this is based on, clearly the name says 111, it's based on the C111 from the 60s and 70s. So what we're gonna do in this video is just see how closely related these two iconic Mercedes are. Yeah, I would call this new one pretty iconic because it is a pretty cool concept. We're gonna have a look at the side, the front, side, rear, and the interior, compare the two, and see the where this new car took inspiration from the original one. Before we do that, let's have a look at this article from CarBuzz and let's walk you through what this new concept is all about. So it's a progressive interpretation of the iconic C111 experimental vehicle the Germans built in the 1960s and the 1970s. It is a gull-wing doored electric supercar with next-gen motor technology capable of nearly 2,000 horsepower. Where will this craziness end? Our goal at Mercedes-Benz is not to do styling. Our goal is to create icons, explains Gordon Wagner, Chief Design Officer, Mercedes-Benz Group. And I wouldn't call the most recent Mercedes iconic in their styling, the new EQ, the whole EQ range. Not a huge fan of this, but this is an electric car, and I think this looks so much better than every other EQ that Mercedes has done up until today. And the new E-Class, that as well. I'm not so sure about the front end styling of that car, and the rear as well, with those star patterns in the taillights. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about this car, the Vision One-Eleven. It's characterized by a cab-forward design, possible only thanks to electrification. And this is one thing that I've talked about before. The good news with electrification and EVs, even though they do lack some of that emotion, connectivity to your driving experience, what's good about it is the designers has a completely free range when it comes to styling the car, specifically when we have a car like this, which has the motors in the wheels themselves. It's not even a platform that you need to design on top of. Instead, you have the engine or the motors in the wheels, which means that everything else, the entire body of the car, you can do whatever you want with that. The only limit is it needs, of course, to house the passengers. It needs to house the human being sitting inside, and that is the only limitation that you have when it comes to the design of these specific EVs. The orange hue is an obvious throwback to the C11, but it's not an exact match. Vision One-Eleven is painted in deep orange with a hint of copper, and the color changes depending on light and angle. And I really like this color that we have here. It just looks stunning, this design. It's a beautiful car, and the paint really helps with that as well. The One-Eleven has a digital insert that can illuminate LED in a pattern resembling old fog lights in the front end. I think it looks really cool. We're gonna have a look at this in more detail when we jump into Photoshop. Mercedes kept the lower air intakes flanking the famous star, nestled quite prominently below the contrasting black air intakes up on the hood. The rear has a digital display with pixelated brake lights and two prominent diffusers. And I've said this a while back, that when Hyundai started doing this with a pixelated light in the Ioniq series, I felt like that was the start of a trend, and it looks like it is because other manufacturers are taking inspiration from that and using these pixelated, stylized lights as a evolution from the normal LED strips and bars that we've had in headlights so far. I think this is a cool approach by Mercedes and Hyundai as well. And I think a lot of other manufacturers are going to jump on the pixelated lights as well. Mercedes says One-Eleven is the first sports car with a lounge interior, and this, to me, this is where it gets tricky. You want to have a car that looks like this. It looks like a hypercar, and then you want to have that be in, the inside feel like a lounge. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. It's a sign of things to come as Mercedes works away at perfecting autonomous driving, which to me sounds just sad, but I know they're gonna keep some cars, hopefully in their lineup, still be connected to the driver in some way, at least I hope so. The car has even a race mode with this type of interior. It clashes so much in the philosophies, having this hypercar styling on the exterior, and then you have this lounge, I don't know what to call this interior, but it does have a race mode. The backrest is upright, and the interior only displays a compact driver-oriented touchscreen. And instead of having this big big curved display that we see in so many cars today, or Mercedes with the entire dash being a screen. Instead, they went with a large dot matrix-like LED panel. As you can see here, again, we're going to talk more about this when we jump into Photoshop. I'm going to let you know what I think about this later in the video. Mercedes is showing us that there are more exciting solutions than simply slapping a screen on every single open surface. I'm not sure if this is any better though. Now, when it comes to the motors of this One-Eleven concept, the Yasa motor, as it's called, it's so compact that it can fit within the wheel itself. The technology here is very, very cool, and this is something that is going to appear in future production Mercedes vehicle. The Vision One-Eleven has up to 4 of these motors, with each producing 480 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. It has up to 1,920 horsepower and 2,360 pound-feet of torque. Is just nuts to think about. You better have some white rubber on this tire to be able to put this power down. So with that said, let's jump into Photoshop here. Let's have a look at this design and compare it to the original beautiful C111 from the 60s and the 70s. So here's the thing with this car. Let's make it green this time, and let me make it red so you can see what I'm doing here. Let's make the color green this time so you can see what I'm doing here. The thing I love about this Mercedes concept, it is all electric, but it looks so completely different from other Mercedes EVs, the EQS, the big, bean SUVs. This still has a little bit of bean shape in it, but it's still a lot better executed than those cars. And I think a lot of that has to do with this lower section. You see the lower part that we have here, this lower splitter, for example, going pretty far up in the corners, and it then continues onto the side and going up in this very traditional sporty way with the big wing going as we go further back towards the rear axle. Then we have some cuts in the body itself, which is a connection to the original concept from the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And we also have a pretty smooth curvatures and surfacing in this design. But I do love what Mercedes did in the front end here, because this clearly, when you see this car, there's no mistaking that they definitely took inspiration from the original C111. You can clearly see the resemblance here also with these outlets or indents that we have in the hood being blacked out. We have that in the new concept as well, looking very cool. And have a look at this beautiful front fender that goes up here and then curves hugging the front tire. So there is zero added height on top of the wheel. It's just a fender that then goes into the front end, and the hood of the car is very beautifully done. I also like these details that we have in the front end. I can't really see the connection with these vents in the original C111, but the rest of the front end, you have the fog lights down here, and as I said in the article, you have this entire piece in the front end being all digital, so it's all made up of pixels. You can put whatever message or something you want in the front end. I'm not sure the reason for that. I would rather just have 2 fog lights at all time because of the connection to the original car. Fantastic execution by Mercedes when it comes to the front end of this car. So looking at the side view, and this is where, EQ series has had a little bit of problems with the bubbliness and the bean shape of their cars. But honestly, I think this actually works, because we have a very nice curvature going from the very rear end, and then in a single curvature dips down to the front end, but they're interrupted by the curvatures that we have on top of the front and the rear axle by these peaks right here in the front, and then we have the same muscle in the rear end. And you can see that more clearly here on these sketches. So I wanted to show you these sketches as well, because it's always fun as a designer to check out the designer's thoughts behind a new car, and that is easily, you can better see those thoughts and ideas in the sketch phase. So up top we have the original C111, looks like it pretty much this sketch could probably also be a modernized version of the C111 with just some different proportions than the actual new 111 concept. But here you can see these peaks being wide with a highlight up top and creating some sort of emotion in this design, and not just have one single curvature from the front to the rear, but instead having these break this curvature up just a little bit and create some more interesting features in this design. Moving down further, we do have this top view sketch. Very hard to sketch in this perspective. First of all, I'm not sure if they used a 3D model to get all the perspectives right here, but it looks like they maybe sketched on top of a CAD model. But still, it's a gorgeous sketch. We're going to have a look at this rear view in just a second when we look at the real concept car. I do love the wheel design of the sketches. They look absolutely fantastic. And as I said before, Mercedes, even though they do have some really weird EQ designs, they always, the wheel design is always on point in their production cars. I do like this line here as well. Have a look at the circular intakes that follows in sort of hugging the overall body of this thing. And you have intakes up top, you have the same type of intakes in the bottom, just looking beautiful in a continuous line, almost like a section cutout around the body of this car. And this is another detail that also breaks up this bean shape visually when you're looking at this car. And then we have, of course, the front end as well down here, looking, as I said, it almost feels like a hypercar. And I love the way they sketched out this front axle and how it goes over the front wheel like we talked about in the front view. It's just a beautiful design and gloss, high gloss sketch like this. You can see some of the bronze coloring inside here being different from the original 60s and 70s cars. But now let's go back to the real car here and have a look at the shading here in the production version. We also have some blue lighting at the bottom. I think this might have to do with the charge. I'm not entirely sure, but it looks cool to have some blue color in this overall very orange car. And I also like that this black graphics at the bottom eats in to some of this volume that we have in this car. And we have a clear cut in the front end, in the rear end, and we also have a clear cut and end point in the front. So it creates some sort of sharpness in this otherwise very, very smooth design. So having a look at the rear view, and I do think the overall, this exterior design is just a fantastic design by Mercedes. I want to see this go into production, but I really doubt that it will go into production looking like it does now, specifically with this crazy interior, which we're going to have a look at in a second. I like that we have a connection from the rear to the front end. You can see just how similar these two are. We do have the same type of pixelated rear end with an entire ellipse or a framing that is full LED around the pixelated rear end. I assume that you can also put whatever text messages you want inside of this and customize it as you like. But again, if it was me, I would probably always keep it to just have these round pixelated taillights, because it resembles the original one so well. So I would not change that and have some cool or fancy messages in the back. Is just not something that I would probably do. And then we have a massive diffuser. Just have a look at this diffuser in the lower part. I think this is probably one of the biggest diffuser I've seen, even on a concept car. And I think it looks great because it lowers the overall volume of the rear end. It would look very cool though without this diffuser. So let's see if we can do something about that real quick and just see what it would look like if we removed this diffuser. So let's paint it, because I think it would make it look more like a 60s supercar if we just remove this piece and have it be orange and going straight into the ground. It looks a lot more like it's hanging over the rear end, and a lot more classic in my opinion having it removed like that. But then again, it's a modern car. You need to bring all the pieces around the car that sits low to the ground. You need to bring those two closer to the ground to not have any sort of lift in the front or in the rear. Last but not least, let's talk about this interior here, because this is where it gets a little weird for me when I look at this interior and compare this interior with the lounge seats and all of that, everything being pixelated and digital, to the exterior design, and I don't think these play very well together. I do love the design of the steering wheel here. It looks absolutely fantastic to have it be boxy like this in the same orange color as the outside. You also see that we have the drive modes and all the selections with these toggles or dials that we have on production Mercedes today. And we also have a new version of the infotainment screen hanging in mid-air, it looks like, just coming out from the steering wheel. I haven't seen that before, but I don't know if I prefer this or if I prefer the all-digital dashboard that Mercedes have in some of their EVs today. You know, personally, if I were to pick between these two interiors, there's no question that I would go with the original 60s, 70s interiors. With the dials being right here, you have even a manual gearbox, as you can see, with this classic Mercedes wheel and the Mercedes logo right here in the middle. This just feels more natural to me, and I think it feels more natural to everybody because nobody has ever seen a dash being pixelated like this, looking like Nasdaq, where you see the stocks and the markets in New York. That's what it reminds me of. And it's not really something I would want to have in the interior of my supercar, specifically when it looks like this. I would like to see a bit more effort from the interior designer and the entire team from Mercedes to put some more effort into the interiors these days. Some interiors that they do, the SL interior for example, looks very good and fantastic, even though the center console display is angled just slightly to the passenger side to have it facing the driver, and I just want to go and try to tilt it back because it's such a tiny angle that it's a little bit annoying. But other than that, the SL interior is one of these great interiors of Mercedes, and an interior that I would much rather see in a production version of this 111 concept. So overall, the final verdict for this concept, as I said, this will most likely not go into production, at least not looking anywhere close to what this concept is looking like. But I would like to see a version of this go into production, and I would like to see, as I said, they keep the exterior design as close to the concept as possible, but they need to work a lot more on the interior design to have that connection between the exterior hypercar design and the interior design as well.